Hello, everybody, and welcome to chapter number 12, Money Creation in the Federal Reserve. Now that we understand what money is, we want to go ahead and see how banks are going to operate. So we use banks every single day. What exactly happens when we put money into the banks? What are banks going to do with your particular deposit, and how exactly can they create money from that one deposit? So that's what we're going to be getting to in this particular chapter. So we have to build up a little bit of accounting. So if you like accounting, this is going to be the chapter for you. If you don't like accounting, well then too bad, because we still have to go through it anyways. So we get through a lot of accounting using a few T accounts, balance sheets, and seeing exactly the inner workings or the foundations of a T account, of a bank's T account. Then we're going to go ahead and build up everything that we've learned from an individual bank and see how that applies to the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the United States, and exactly how they can utilize monetary policy to influence the economy. So here, just the idea of how banks work and the idea of the central bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve, in this particular chapter. So with all of this, we want to go ahead and see what banks do. And banks obviously are going to be financial institutions that help to match borrowers and savers together. So money is created when financial institutions accept deposits and make loans. So when you are a saver, you're going to go ahead and deposit money into the bank. We've already talked about this in the previous chapter. But then the bank can do something with your particular deposit, and they can loan it out to other individuals. So here that's going to be the borrowers in this instance. And when the bank actually starts to lend out money to other borrowers, this actually begins the money creation process and increases the money supply within the entire economy. So in order to see this entire process working out, when the bank is going to accept money from the savers and lend them out to borrowers, we're going to introduce a little bit of accounting here. And the basic accounting sort of convention that we're going to use is something known as a T account. So T accounts. And T accounts are basically just going to be the simplified balance sheet for a bank. So a simplified balance sheet for banks. Simplified balance sheets for banks. For the bank. And within this T account, we only focus in on two main variables. We have assets, which are going to be on our left-hand side. And assets are essentially the money that the bank claims. Money that the bank claims, meaning that these are essentially assets that the bank can utilize for their own operations. It's essentially their money or their asset. They can use it for their own benefit. Next, on the right-hand side, we have the second variable, which are going to be liabilities. And liabilities are money that the bank owes to other people. So money that the bank owes. So here, essentially, the liabilities is the money that the bank has to give to other people. It is technically not their money, so therefore it is seen as a liability for them. And these are the only two variables that we are going to be taking a look at with our T account. And like the name, the balance sheet implies, both of these things have to be equal to one another, or they have to balance. So here, main assumption that we are going to be working with is assets must equal liabilities. So the left-hand side has to equal to the right-hand side. If you have taken an accounting class before, you're noticing that we are leaving out our third variable, which is owner's equity. The equation that you typically see is assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. In this particular class, we're not going to be focused on owner's equity at all, so we're just leaving that out completely just to simplify our analysis. So here, assets have to equal liabilities. So what happens with the bank when you decide to go ahead and put in a particular amount of money into the bank? So suppose that you deposit $500 into your checking account. Let's go ahead and start off a T account. So suppose you deposit $500 cash into your checking account. At whatever bank you do your banking at. So it doesn't matter, TD Bank, Wells Fargo, Chase Bank, SunTrust, wherever you do your banking, you decide to put your $500 cash into your checking account. So for you, it doesn't really matter if you hold this $500 in cash or if you put it into the bank because it is your money. You can use this $500 cash for purchases of goods and services. If you put it into the bank, it's going to be drawn off of your checking account. You can use your debit card to draw money off of that. It's perfectly normal for you to do either one of these things, and it doesn't really matter for you because they're both seen as categories of M1, very, very liquid, so therefore it is your money. However, it does depend for the economy and for the banking system on whether or not you decide to hold the cash on hand in your wallet or in your purse, or if you decide to put it into the banking system. Because if you decide to hold this $500 in cash under your mattress or in your purse or wallet, new money cannot actually be created within the entire economy. So you actually have to put money into the banking system, into the bank, in order for new money to be created and to start the money creation process. So let's go ahead and see a few of these different things. So let's go ahead and start off initially with the bank's T account when you deposit $500 into the bank. Here we take a look at a simplified T account. We have assets on the left-hand side, and then we have liabilities on the right-hand side. Liabilities. So here we have a simplified T account, and the name T account gets because, hey, it looks like a lowercase t in this instance. So here, how does this $500 cash turn up into the assets of the bank and turns into the liabilities of the bank? So we can do the easy part first, which is going to be the liabilities of the bank. So when you deposit $500 into your checking account, we consider this, the bank considers this to be a deposit. So a deposit equal to $500, so a positive $500 right here. And why exactly is this considered a liability for the bank? Because it is your money, it is your $500, and whenever you want to withdraw your $500 or some amount other than $500, that is, the bank has to let you have your money. So here it is considered your money, but it's considered a liability for the bank because they have to readily make your money available to you when you need it. However, they are betting on the fact, the bank is betting on the fact that you don't need this entire $500 all at once, but we notice that it comes up on the asset side as well because it is essentially money that the bank claims. Remember that assets have to equal liabilities in this issue, in this sort of circumstances. So when we think about banks, we typically think that they have a big vault in the back where they hold all their valuables, all their cash. So the bank can absolutely hold your $500 cash as vault cash. And we can see it right here, vault cash. And it's going to be a same $500 positive increase right here. So the left-hand side does equal the right-hand side. So you deposit $500 cash into the bank, it becomes a liability, a deposit for them, and then they're going to take that $500 and put it into the back of the bank where they have the big vault, so that $500 is very safe in the bank. However, the bank doesn't necessarily, as we already mentioned, they don't have to hold your entire $500 deposit as cash in the vault. They are betting that that on any one given day, you aren't necessarily going to pull out the entire $500 all at once. Sure, maybe you may take out maybe $10, $100 here and there, but they are betting on the fact that you are not going to pull out your entire deposit all on one day. So what would the bank like to do with a portion of the cash assets that they have on hand now? So they would like to go ahead and make some type of money off of that. And how exactly do banks make money? That's where they go ahead and make out loans to other people and get some type of interest. So let's go ahead and see how our T account, how the bank's balance sheet is going to change when they decide that they don't necessarily want to hold your entire $500 deposit as cash in the vault. So we do realize that banks don't have to hold all deposits as reserves. It's just by law, they don't have to, because they have to make some type of money for themselves. So banks do not have to hold all deposits as reserves. And reserves is just a really fancy word for cash. So here, banks do not have to hold all deposits as reserves. Once again, it gets into the idea of the fractional reserve banking system, where basically the bank does not have to hold your entire deposit as just cash in the vault or as reserves. What would they like to do instead? They'd like to lend out some amount. Would like to lend out some amount. And they are perfectly able to lend out some amount because, number one, that's going to be the way how the bank makes a vast majority of its money. They're going to get some type of interest on that. And number two, it's not required by law. So they don't have to hold your entire $500 as cash in the vault. They can absolutely go ahead and lend some money out. So let's go ahead and assume that the bank wants to lend out $300. So suppose bank wants to lend out $300. How is the bank's balance sheet or T account going to change as a result of this transaction right here? So we still have this typical T account. We have assets on the left-hand side, build up the T. We have liabilities on the right-hand side, liabilities. So has the liability side changed at all? And the answer is it has not. So here, it is still your $500 deposit that they have to hold, that they have as a liability. It is your money, so basically it is money that the bank owes to you. However, the left-hand side, the sort of components are going to change just a little bit. They want to lend out $300, so how much that vault cash do they have on hand? They only have $200 in cash on hand now. So where's the other $300 going to be coming out of? Remember that the left-hand side still has to equal the right-hand side. That's where the bank goes ahead and makes some type of loans. And the loans are exactly where the bank is going to make money. They lend it out to some other parishioner or customer into the bank. And that is essentially going to be an asset for the bank because they are generating some type of income or interest on these loans right here. And essentially, we still have assets equal to liabilities. We're just dividing up on how things change just a little bit on the asset side right here. And with this, by the bank lending out this particular amount right here with these loans, that's going to go ahead and begin the money creation process. So by making loans, it starts money creation. Process. So here, in order for banks to actually increase or change the money supply within the entire economic system, you actually have to go ahead and put money into the banks, and the banks need to start making loans out of that. With this in mind, do you think that banks by themselves can create an infinite amount of money from any one deposit that comes into the bank? So with this $500 deposit, can banks create an infinite amount of money? And the answer is going to be no in this instance. So you might think that banks can just sort of magically make money appear out of thin air, and that's what the Federal Reserve can actually do. But for banks themselves, smaller commercial banks, they can't actually create an infinite amount of money from one new deposit that comes into the bank because they are going to be limited by how much they can lend out. So that's where the sort of reserve ratio and reserve requirements come into play, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But as we can notice from all of this, we have a better idea of how T accounts work and the sort of idea that the assets have to equal the liabilities. And by banks making loans, it's going to start us off on the money creation process. But how much money they can create is something that we will have to go ahead and learn later on. So with all of this, we do realize that banks, these financial institutions, act as a bridge between savers and borrowers. And basically, the banks are going to take money from us when we deposit money to the bank, and they are going to lend them out to borrowers who need money. So they need to go ahead and pay for, they need to go ahead and buy some big ticket item, or they can lend it out to some firms or corporations that need to undertake some type of investment project. A bank's ability to make loans, to create money, is limited to a certain percentage of its total customer deposits, meaning that, hey, they cannot create an infinite amount of money. It is limited to a certain percentage, and we'll see this in the next section. And banks must hold a percentage of their total deposits as reserves. So by law, the banks cannot lend out your entire deposit. They have to hold a portion of your deposit as reserves or as cash in the vault. So with all of this in mind, there are going to be three big macroeconomic sort of variables within the banking system that we need to go ahead and take a look at. And we'll go ahead and take a look at the mathematical and accounting sort of examples of all of this in the next two videos. So we'll go ahead and stop this video, and I'll see you guys in those particular sections.